Hi, I'm Scott Weston, and I like life lessons from Alexis Rose on Schitt's Creek.
Welcome to the Finding Favorites podcast, where we explore your favorite things without using an algorithm. Here's your host, Leah Jones.
Hi there, this is your host, Leah Jones. It is the Saturday night before Thanksgiving, and I'm recording this from home, where I will be for Thanksgiving with my one indoor pod person, my friend Ezra, who lives upstairs. I hope that you are taking appropriate precautions, and by that I mean that you've decided to stay home and not travel and put yourself and your family and strangers at risk. COVID is at an all-time high, and we all have to do our part, and that means staying home, listening to a lot of podcasts, playing a lot of Candy Crush, watching The Crown, watching The Queen's Gambit, watching every holiday rom-com you can find, and staying home. And eating so many more turkey leftovers. Today's episode is with a colleague of mine, Scott Weston. Scott and I, as you'll hear, met this summer working on a website project. And he's at an agency, and he was a vendor. I think one of the funny things about COVID is it's hard to meet new people. It's hard to meet new people and feel like you click and feel like you might have met like a new friend or someone that you're going to look forward to seeing in the post-COVID reality. It was really fun getting to meet Scott this summer, and honestly, his whole team was fantastic. A great group of people. When we did this interview, I was a day away from launching the website I'd been working on. He was a few days away from launching a new website. And it was fun, really fun to get to talk about Schitt's Creek, which we'd only talked about in passing on meetings about building a new website. So this is your spoiler alert. If you haven't seen Schitt's Creek and you plan on watching it and you hate spoilers, save this episode for later. If you have seen it, this is a fun conversation. Scott is a super fan who completely has caught so many more details than I ever have on Schitt's Creek. And if you're never going to watch it and you just want to hear two people talk about what they like, then this is a good episode. Unlike some other episodes, like my recent interview with Sean Ellis, or even with Taya Lux, I don't knit. I don't do medieval sword stuff, but I do watch TV, and I have watched Schitt's Creek a couple times through. So this is one where one of my guest favorite things is also up there on my list. I hope that you have plans for a safe, small Thanksgiving, that you are taking COVID seriously. Please hop on over to iTunes or another place where you can rate and review this podcast. I feel like I'm getting my feet on solid ground with how to do an interview and how to edit the sound. And although, fair warning, we recorded this on an incredibly windy day, and I had a hard time controlling for the 40 mile per hour wind outside of my living room window. So please be forgiving on the sound of wind. And with that, stay home, stay safe, wash your hands, wear a mask, and happy Thanksgiving. Hello, and welcome to Finding Favorites. I'm your host, Leah Jones, and this is a podcast where we find out about people's favorite things and we get recommendations without using an algorithm. Almost every week, I have someone on who I know from the internet, and this week is totally different. Today, I have Scott Weston with me. How are you today, Scott?
I'm well, thank you.
So Scott and I were put together on a massive project he works at an agency. I now work at a financial services firm. And this summer we were put on a massive website redesign, which goes live tomorrow in real time, but like last week or a couple weeks ago in podcast time. So over the summer, we saw each other on Zoom approximately 80 times a week.
Just about. Yeah. I think my average was 74 is what I came up with.
74.
Yeah.
And over the course of working together, I learned that Scott communicates often in Schitt's Creek GIFs or GIFs. I started a podcast, and eventually I started nagging him to come on my podcast. And he had two options. And one, I said no. One was Drupal, which he is an expert in. But I said, I don't have people on to interview them at work. Let me interview you about these GIFs that you post all the time. And so today, in a little bit, we're going to talk about Schitt's Creek. But that's the story of how we got to today. Is that a fair retelling?
Yes, it is. Massive project between our organizations is absolutely true. And I didn't know that the site was going to go live tomorrow in real time. I'm excited to see that.
We're all really excited. Yesterday, in between podcast interviews, I was getting emails from Bill saying, can you go on this page? There's 3 links that still link to production. So yesterday was a lot of despite having searched the site for every bad link, it's impossible.
Right. Yeah. The best thing to do is to fail forward in those cases. Just get the site launched and then deal with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've now been from one Friday the 13th to another.
Yes.
But how has the COVID pause been going for you?
The COVID pause has been really good in the sense that I am my inner hermit is really thriving right now. But I am missing, some connection with humans. But I am finding things to keep me occupied in my free time. Much like you have a big website launching tomorrow, our company has a big website launching on Thursday of this week. So it's kind of all hands on deck. So this is my break time here talking with you. So it's an amazing way to spend some free time.
What are some of your hermit hobbies that you've picked up or embraced during COVID?
I feel like I have done a lot more Netflix and consumption of TV shows and movies than I normally do. I do say I'm an introvert, a hermit, but during the summer, I typically try to get outside of the house since Chicago only has beautiful weather for 3, maybe 4 months. Getting outside, connecting with people, having drinks on a patio are kind of my go-tos in the summer. And this summer I did get to have a few drinks on patios, which was really nice. Yeah. Even 6 feet away from people while we're sitting outside. I am very COVID safe. I will put it that way. I get apprehensive when I go into a grocery store. I get apprehensive when I see the people not covering their face inside of Home Depot. That's my screaming on the inside just ratchets up every time I see someone with the chin strap of a mask going on, or the feed bag, as it's called, when your nose is popping out. Yeah,
I'm with you on that. I'm very risk averse, yes. I think is the phrase I want to use. I'm really lucky because one of my best friends moved to my building. He came from New York. So now I have an indoor pod friend that I can have dinners with and hug on occasion.
Oh, nice.
Which has improved my quality of life for sure.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear. Yeah. So when we're recording this is the day before Chicago goes back into more restrictive measures. And basically the mayor has told us to cancel Thanksgiving plans. And most of my family is in Oklahoma. And I typically go back to Oklahoma once or twice a year. Not doing that this year for obvious reasons. And I was going to have a few people from work and a friend come over for a Friendsgiving. And now I'm in the debate phase of is it okay to have 2 people over for Friendsgiving, or should I just cancel it? And I'm leaning towards canceling, but we'll see where my head is in a week, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, maybe everybody can still cook their dishes and just come to your driveway with them already dished out into Tupperware, and you can do an exchange.
Sure. Yeah.
So Unless you're doing all the cooking.
No. Oh, no.
Yeah, we were also going to have we've been having these conversations with our friends that come over for Fire Pit of like, who do we want to be in an indoor relationship with this winter? Mm-hmm. The restrictions came back out, and we had been planning maybe 6 weeks ago that like, obviously we were going to do Thanksgiving together. And this week we were like, let's just order in and figure, if there's good weather that week, we'll have a fire and we'll sit outside together. But indoor friendship seems just terrifying right now.
It does. And, I think when we first went into, I'll call it lockdown, for lack of a better term, people were being very safe, at least my friend circle was. And then in the summer, I noticed some of my friends were getting a little more relaxed, and they would say, "Hey, Scott, why don't you come over? We'll hang out on the patio, or we'll go grab a drink at such and such place whose patio is open." And it would be also in the same time, I would see Facebook posts of my friends who are having a house party of 20 people. And it's like, no. Well, no, even if it's outside, no thanks. It just takes like a sneeze or a cough, or, you go in for the hug that, you'll catch COVID, and I just don't want that.
Yeah. I agree. I'm Thanksgiving for me has often been ooh.
That sounds dangerous.
Did you get it yet?
No. And I did put my phone on like do not disturb, so it may.
Mine's on silent now.
It may break through that. I don't know. Can you hear Esther in the background?
No.
Okay.
Is she talking?
She's downstairs screaming about something. I don't know. Oh.
Spidey lately has gotten to a place where he doesn't like eating alone anymore.
Okay.
He's 19.
Okay.
And so he will, if I have anything chicken, he'll dig the chicken bones out of the trash, hunt them, bring them into the living room, and gnaw at them next to me. And if there are no chicken bones, he will like hunt his own soft food and like scream, and then bring in like a mouthful of soft cat food into the living room, drop it on the floor, and like he's like, "Look, I hunted," and then he'll eat. And it's the weirdest noise, and it has really started freaking people out.
Yeah, my cats are starting to act a little weird. And it could just be that I'm home all the time, so I'm seeing a side of them that normally comes out when I'm not around. But I have, so Mordecai is the shy cat, and apparently he loves singing when during the day. Just it's kind of our morning routine is I wake up, I get coffee, make coffee downstairs, feed the cats, and then I'll come upstairs to my office and start doing work, and just working. And then there's just this caterwauling going on, like that deep, like guttural meowing. And I'm like, that's coming out of that little tiny kitty is just making all this noise downstairs. And I don't know what it is.
They're good roommates, though. I don't know how people have done COVID without people who live alone and don't have animals. I think has got to be the hardest way to do COVID.
Sure. Yeah. So. I have had conversations with my cats that I normally wouldn't have. It's like there are those moments where you're like, oh, blah, blah, blah. And you're just talking to the cat. And then I realize I'm talking to my cat, and my cat does not care. Like neither. They're just both pretty aloof. So I was not a fruitful conversation with the cats. Especially when I realized what I was actually doing. Only thought crazy people did that, but either I'm crazy or maybe not crazy people do that.
Yeah. I mean,
some of the things that I've, at work, we've had these like sometimes 3 and 4 hour Teams calls and Zoom calls while we just all work on our own computers and chime in with each other occasionally. And I think that's been part of, definitely for some of us, like we just need to feel that human connection and not just a cat connection. I mean, obviously, I could just talk to you about our cats for the whole interview.
Right.
But lest everyone in the world think we are completely crazy cat people,
Yes.
What I did ask you to come and talk about today, begged you to come and talk about.
It wasn't quite begging.
Is Schitt's Creek.
Yes.
The Canadian sitcom that wrapped up this year by Dan and Eugene Levy.
Yes. One of my favorite TV shows of all time.
Awesome. I'm so excited. When we first talked about this, season 6 wasn't on Netflix yet. And so I found an illegal way to watch it. Felt guilty about it. And then season 6 came out on Netflix and I was like, okay, we can talk about it. This will be full of spoilers. So this is your warning. We're talking about Schitt's Creek. It's available. It's on Netflix. If you haven't watched all of it, turn off the podcast.
Yes. Go watch. Yeah. Go binge Schitt's Creek and then come back.
Yes. So how did you first find Schitt's Creek?
I am a relative newbie to Schitt's Creek as far as like, the span of the entire series. I watched my first episode of Schitt's Creek, I want to say just a little over a year ago.
Okay.
And how that came about was last summer. So pre-COVID, the summer pre-COVID, I was hanging out with some friends, and we were having a couple of drinks, and two of my friends were talking about, Schitt's Creek in general. And someone said, we should have a Moira party.
Okay.
Not knowing that Moira is a person's name, not knowing the context of that, they just started talking about Moira. And at first I thought, what is this Moira? I was thinking it was like an organization or the show. There was a show named Moira. I don't know.
Right.
And so then I got clued in that Moira is just this outlandish character. And they tried to explain the wigs and, the dress and all of that. And I wasn't getting it. So they had planned this Moira party, for the next month. Actually, I think it was last fall. So it was like October of last year.
Yeah.
And so I was invited to the Moira party, and they said this is going to be a dress up party, like a costume party. It was a couple weeks before Halloween. So, Halloween, costumes were abounding. So you could get the wigs and you can get some crazy, costume stuff. So I decided, okay, I'm going to watch the show. So I get some context. I'm going to go to this party. We'll have some fun. So I watched
And are you thinking I'll watch a couple episodes and I'll know who Moira is? Or are you thinking I'll watch the whole show?
I am pretty much an all or nothing kind of person.
All right.
So I'll give a series like a couple of episodes, unless someone is very strongly saying you got to get past season 1. You got to get past, X or Y. And so I started season 1, episode 1, kind of setting the whole premise for the show, in the fish out of, starting the fish out of water story, family loses everything. They move to this town and then they start their lives. And I think it was probably, and I'll take a step back. I've been a fan of Eugene Levy and Catherine O'Hara for forever, like Best in Show, this Spinal Tap. I think some of them are in there. And so just that kind of mockumentary sort of thing. And I cringe, but I love watching like just the absurdity and awkwardness of a show like of a movie like Best in Show. So I watched season 1, episode 1, and I was like, it was a pilot, even though it wasn't called the pilot, like, every other series, it was called Our Cup Runneth Over. So I watched a few episodes, and probably around episode 3 or 4, that's when it really started to get good for me. I know like the first couple of episodes were really just kind of setting the scene, getting the characters established. And then after that, it was just, I could not watch the show fast enough.
Okay.
Up until that party, I think I was watching like 6 or 7 episodes a day. I was just like churning through them. And this was when episode 5 had just landed on Netflix. And that's when all of the fanfare and like people just really elevating their fanaticism about this show, and the critics.
There was so much hype by the time season 5 came out.
Yes. So I was definitely late getting on the Schitt's Creek train.
Yeah.
So,
because I think I found it, maybe 3 seasons were out when I watched it the first time. And I tried a few episodes of season 1 because I have enough friends in Canada that were tweeting about it. Mm-hmm. So I was aware of it. And I watched a few episodes and I was like, well, these are all horrible people. And I'm not enjoying, like, the Chris Elliott character in season 1 is so gross. Like, there's like the fondue dinner.
Yeah. Yes.
Which, especially post-COVID, is gross.
There are so many episodes that have so much different meaning today than they did, when they aired. And they, in some ways, are even better today than when they aired. The fondue dinner, I think that was like the 2nd or 3rd episode.
Yeah, it's early.
It's early on. Everybody who's listening probably knows. So Johnny gave David, so the dad gave the son, the deed to the town of Schitt's Creek as a joke birthday present one year. Yeah. And that's how they ended up in Schitt's Creek. That was the only thing the government would let them hang on to. They talked to the mayor, got a free stay at the Schitt's Creek Motel. I don't know if you can actually own a town. I don't know if that's an actual like plausible thing.
It is.
It is. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're at least out west, you can buy deeds to like ghost towns. So like if you can buy a town as vibrant as Schitt's Creek, I don't know, but I think when you look at, Chicago sells bonds and gets investors. And if you're a tiny town with like 500 people and you sell a bond in order to pay for you're governing, I guess you could end up with like one rich family owning the town.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know. That's based on what I've learned in 3 months working in financial services.
Okay. Yeah. And that gets into that. What is it called? The willing suspension of disbelief, that you have to buy into the premise of what you're watching in order to really enjoy it. So there's like the buying the town, and then, we're going to move to this town, and the mayor, who we've never met, is going to let us stay for free at this motel. Right. That in the beginning, you think he probably is like a part owner of the motel or something. And then you find out later that he's not. So, those are like the two big premise things, buying the town and then moving into the town's motel. Yeah. Yeah. We got off on a sidetrack there. I forgot where we were.
There are no sidetracks.
Okay. There are no sidetracks. Great.
No, we're having a conversation about Schitt's Creek.
It's the dinner. It was the Roland dinner.
The fondue dinner.
The fondue dinner means so much now. Yes. Season 1, Roland is repulsive.
Yeah.
And I think that was intentional, that he was supposed to be so off-putting in the beginning. But then over the course of the 6 seasons, you actually, get to like Roland and get to appreciate that through all the ham-handedness of how we handle situations, that he actually is a nice person. And he is thoughtful. And you can see that even in moments like when, Johnny needs to go get his unemployment. So he has to go over to the next town. I think it was Elmdale in that episode. And he plays with Bob, he goes to Bob's garage to test drive a car, and we'll have to have an entire conversation about Bob. And then as he's going to Elmdale to the unemployment office, that car that he was test driving from Bob broke down. And then Roland comes and takes him to that unemployment office. And while they're in the truck, Roland is just really trying to get out of Johnny. Like, why are you so insistent on going to Elmdale today before, 4:00? And when Johnny finally does admit, like, I'm going so I can get unemployment, then Roland just says, well, it's none of my business. Why are you telling me this? Even after asking him for like a solid 20 seconds of like, why are you going? Why aren't you not telling me? And then when Johnny does say something, and he doesn't want
embarrass him any further,
and just really, that's one of those first moments when you see, okay, Roland is actually a nice person.
So for me, I watched those first few episodes. I was like, well, they're all awful. I hate them. And then maybe 6 months later, I think probably I was recovering from my hysterectomy. So I watched a lot of TV. Okay. Those few weeks, I was home for like a month. So I watched season 2. And in season 2, everybody's a lot more human. Mm-hmm. And caring, and it's not so mean about the town and the townspeople. So I watched season 2, fell in love with everybody, and then started over. So then season 1 became palatable to me because I knew eventually they all become like good, endearing people. And now I care about them.
Right.
And then I watched it, start to finish at least twice.
Mm-hmm. I think I remember... I think it was Dan Levy. Who at one point said, the real premise of the show is this family, very well off, very wealthy, loses everything. But the twist on it is the family themselves were not doing something to cause the loss of that money. It wasn't like insider trading and the government came and took all their money away. At its base level, these are generally good people who are just out of touch because of their money. And you see that play out through seasons 2 and 3 and 4, 5, 6. It's not like rich people who are horrible and they would still be horrible people if they don't have their money. Right. Thinking of like some, celebrities who are celebrities because the only thing that is celebrity about them is that they're celebrities.
Right.
Not going to name names, but they may have had some shows on MTV over time.
Yes. I have actually there's so many possibilities there. It's somewhat endless. Or they may have shows on Bravo, which is now like the center of that universe now. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good point that they didn't lose their economic standing through their own bad behavior, but through like ignoring their business partners, right? Like not auditing their money guy.
Right.
So you have like a month's warning before the Moira party, yes. Or like 2 weeks, a month.
Yeah, it was like a month or 6 weeks or something like that.
And you're like, just pedal to the metal.
Yes. I went a little ham on it. I really did. And normally when I'm watching a show, it's really hard for a TV show just to capture my full attention. Normally I've got my laptop, I'm checking some work emails, I'm slacking with people, I've got my phone out, just the TV show is there and I'll look up when I hear something or see something of interest. This was totally different. It was just full focus. And that was my time, is just watching and absorbing the show. And yeah, I watched the entire series that was available up to the time, probably within 2 weeks. It was a lot of TV time.
I mean, they're short episodes.
Yeah.
So watching 6 in a night is, watching 3 episodes of Game of Thrones or listening to 2 podcasts. It's not 6 hours. It's 2.5, 3 hours. So, which now sounds like a short, quaint amount of binging TV time.
Right.
Yeah. Because you would have to commute, you go to work, commute, and then you get to start watching TV. It's not like now where the commute is so short.
Right. Yeah. I go down 1 flight of stairs to from my upstairs office downstairs to the living room, and I have TV right there. Yeah. Totally different commute these days. Loving the extra sleep in time that I'm getting right now too.
Oh, I love it.
Right. How are we ever going to go back to going to the office 5 days a week?
I don't think we ever go back to 5 days a week.
I don't think so either. I think the world has, make sure I get my tenses correct. I think when COVID is over, the world will have had enough change to realize that you don't have to be in an office 8 to 5 Monday through Friday in order to be productive.
Yep.
And I think in some cases that's really good. So if you're a parent and you need to be at home by 3:30 because kids are coming home, that's great. If you need to have a little more flexible working hours because of co-parenting or whatever, that's always going to be a good thing. But I think we'll get to the point where there's going to be some term that is going to come about for I have to be in person for this meeting. And it's going to be those important meetings, with other people where being in person is going to be important. And I don't know what that term is going to be, but it's going to be something. It's not going to be, because before it was the flip side of it was when you're working from home, you're telecommuting, that was the term of art. And now we're just working.
Yeah. I look forward to maybe having in office, a lot of businesses have core working hours. Mm-hmm. They want everyone online, let's say between 10 and 3.
Right.
Those are the core hours. And then you adjust your time in relation to that. So I could imagine there being core in-person days for departments. If marketing, if we could have through this website launch, been in person together on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, as for example, if we could have had 2 in-person days a week during this, it would have been really helpful. There were times when it would have just really been nice to be in a room together. And I look forward to those.
Yeah, I can see that. And I think even for those people that were partially remote or my company, we have offices all over the country. Yeah. And we have some people, we name offices for something, in the city or, themed with the city. Yeah. So in Chicago, we have the studio. In Wheaton, we have the lodge. In, Pittsburgh, we have the foundry. So it's just kind of naming those cities. And anyone who was a full-time remote worker, they work at the Outpost. So that's their office is called the Outpost. And so right now we're all at the Outpost. I think one of the things that has changed in how I work is Slack conversations are much shorter now than they used to be. And it seems counterintuitive, but there's not always that getting to the point thing. You just get to the point. It's instead of hi, Leah, how's it going? ? And you have this back and forth, this perfunctory back and forth for a minute. Right. It's more hey, Leah, do you have the stats on blah, blah, blah? You just get right to it. And I think there's not a tone of terseness about it. It's just this is our working mode now. That's what I needed to ask you. And if you were in the cubicle next to me, I would have just popped my head over and said, hey, Leah, you got the stats for blah, blah, blah. And instead of having a conversation leading up to it.
Yeah.
And I even find myself now, if I'm wanting to say hi to somebody, like if I want to say hi to a coworker, I say, "Hey, good morning, Matthew. How are you doing?" I have no agenda, just saying hi.
Yeah.
You have to clarify, like, I'm not going to get to anything. We're just talking. We're just chit chatting.
Yeah. So it's been interesting.
Yeah. It's definitely a life adjustment, much like the roses.
Yeah. Yes. So the Moira party.
The Moira party.
What Moira look did you go for?
So it wasn't, you have to dress up as Moira.
Oh, okay.
I went
You had to dress up as Schitt's Creek something.
Yes. I went as David. I chickened out. I got like the black hair wig. I bought this hoodie from TJ Maxx or Ross or something like that, and stopped at the Hancock Fabrics and got, Michael's or something like that, and got this like piece of like a feather boa essentially, and I just glued it like in various ways on this hoodie, so it looked something David adjacent. I wouldn't say it was not high fashion by any means. You could definitely see the hot glue stringies on it still. So yeah, I went as David to this to the Moira party. There were like 3 or 4 Moiras that were there.
Okay.
2 people dressed as Johnny, and one dressed as Johnny in the nightshirt, which was that was my favorite. That's
fantastic.
That was my favorite. Yeah. And
I would say Johnny is the true cop out, because you're like, where's my nicest suit?
Yes.
That's dressing as Johnny, right? It's just a very nice suit.
Yeah. Even when Johnny is just at home, he's got his jacket on. Like he's sitting at the table in the motel room reading the paper. He's got his jacket on.
Yeah.
So, I'm guessing his wardrobe for the show probably came from his closet. This is my guess.
Probably.
Eugene Levy's wardrobe is Johnny Rose's wardrobe.
Although Johnny Rose probably, I don't think Eugene Levy is quite as into pocket squares as Johnny Rose.
Probably not.
What is it for you about this series that you love so much? That after only, for a lot of people, their favorite TV show is maybe something they grew up with when they were kids and they've rewatched as an adult, or like a Doctor Who that's been on for 50 years and you can pop in and out. So what is it about this show that was only 6 seasons and you've only known for a year that has gone to the top of your list?
I think it's several things. First is, and I'm not sure quite how to articulate this. Like Schitt's Creek is a place I would want to go live. And I'm not a big fan of small towns, but like there's no hate in Schitt's Creek. And, whether it's like, David is a pansexual, he likes the wine and not the label, or, Ronnie, knows the florist. When she says she knows the florist, she knows the florist. So there's like, and there's just no hate. There's no like, there aren't factions so much, there's like the playful factions, but there's not like us versus them kind of environment. People are just genuinely and on a base level, they're good people in Schitt's Creek. So, there's that aspect of it. But also like the writing is really well done on that show. There are some through lines that go through the entire series. If you think of like some other shows like, like Big Bang Theory, another sitcom, half-hour sitcom. The characters are different in season 1 than they are even in season 2. It's like they get through season 1 and then the writers and producers are like, nope, Sheldon needs to lean in on being just the weird guy, or, Penny needs to lean in on being like the dumb blonde. There's none of that. And even like on a show like Big Bang Theory, which I'm also a fan of, it's like they're pitting the stereotypes against each other. And
Right.
there's not a lot of stereotyping in Schitt's Creek. You know,
certainly not by the time you get into later seasons.
yeah, for sure.
They definitely I would say they use stereotypes as shorthand to some extent in season 1. And then I think they flip it. Like pretty quickly they're introducing you to stereotypes, I think, and then they're pretty quickly deepening the character.
Yes. Yeah. And you can see that. Yeah, you're correct. And I think you can see it, especially with like Alexis. You know, she is like, you know, pick celebrity socialite, you know,
She's like a Paris
Hilton, Kim Kardashian, you know, whatever. And there is that short, like you phrase it perfectly. There is that shorthand of the things that she has done in her life up to that point and what she's focused on, what's important to her. Like in season 1, it's Stavros and her, you know, she's going to like get taken away from Schitt's Creek by Stavros, the person that she'd been dating for 3 months, and they almost said, "I love you" twice or something like that. And they broke up like 4 times in that 3 months.
Right.
And then like, so that's that shorthand. And then as season 1 ends and you get into season 2, then you start seeing, Alexis starting to grow as a person. You start to see like, you know, who she really is inside come out.
I think that she has one of the most tremendous arcs of the series.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, she has the most growth by season 4, Singles Week, the last episode of season. Well, I think the Christmas episode is the last episode of that season, but the last timeline part of the timeline, season 4 is the season finale. That's Singles Week. And, it's in that episode that you become a Ted and Alexis cheerleader. You want that to happen. You want that to work. Yep. And, and then from that moment on, it's, I've been a Ted and Alexis fan. I've been rooting them on the entire time. Skipping ahead to the last season where they broke up. That was like one of the hardest episodes for me to watch, because you knew what was going to happen. Yeah. Ted shows up, we need to talk. And when they finally get to talking, you know where it's going to go. And then Alexis has that moment where she invites Ted to the diner and they have that one last romantic dinner before they go their different ways. Yeah, that was like one of the hardest episodes for me to watch.
Because I think it's a very real decision that a lot of people have to make.
Yes.
The career, location, love, those are all like at different points in your life, decisions you're making. Like, what are you going to focus on? And can you ask a partner to travel? I looking back, really enjoyed the humor of the Galapagos beach vacation storyline, for the humor of it, for it is what Alexis was trying to get back to the whole time, was to be able to go somewhere tropical and exotic and like her old life. But she is finally coming into her own self, and her own career and her relationship with her family is the most important it's ever been. And that while what she kind of thinks she wants the whole time is love and a beach, ultimately she's got to put like herself, her career, and her family before that. Right.
And she's arguably the one that didn't get the happy ending in the series. She had to give up on love on that. In that last season, but she also showed remarkable growth in that she wasn't asking Ted to give up his dream, which was working, at the research place in the Galapagos Islands. It was just one of those moments where that's when you saw you saw like how far she had come from being hyper focused on status and location and money. She then knew what her self-worth was, and she wanted to go for what she wanted to go for. And she wasn't asking Ted to give up his stuff, his dreams either.
Wait, is it not a happy ending to put your career first?
Well,
sorry.
Yeah. It's one of those happy ending sitcom styles where they get it all. They get the love, they get the job. They find that they thread that needle to like get to that point where they work through all the problems and they end up with the person that you're rooting for them to end up with. And that doesn't happen.
Yeah. I thought it was tremendous. I mean, obviously having David and Patrick and their wedding, is phenomenal. Because even in the wedding, you get the like Moira, like her emotions finally start to break through as they all realize that what they thought was the finish line all along, which was like a return to status, a return to space, a return to independence, the parents being independent of the kids and everybody having their own big space. And that wedding is the moment where, you know, they're moving to LA in the morning to shoot the soap opera.
Yeah, they're moving to California
instead of New York. David's staying with Patrick. Alexis is going alone to New York, and Stevie's staying behind too to like run the business from Schitt's Creek.
Right. It was, when Moira was performing the wedding, she said something along the lines of, we're gathered here today to, for David and Patrick's marriage, but for the faded flap of a butterfly wing, we would not be here. Because if Eli, the business manager, hadn't, stolen all their money, they would just be, the Roses would still just be trucking down the road that they were trucking down. Alexis would be, held hostage in some palace somewhere. And, David would just be the serial, like, art curator for all these galleries that the Roses are like backing behind the scenes, so David can feel like he's a success. And they didn't reach the finish line they were looking for, but they got to where they wanted to go.
Do you have episodes now that you like to revisit, or that you can imagine like these 5 episodes are your like warm blanket, like I need some comfort, so I'm going to go back to these? Or do you have some comfort food episodes?
I do. The family dinner. So this was season 2. The enchiladas. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Moira's enchiladas.
You fold in cheese. You fold in the cheese.
Yeah. That's one of those like early in the series. I know it's season 2, but one of those early in the series scenes, the David and Moira are in Jocelyn's kitchen trying to make the cheese sauce for the enchiladas. And they're just so out of their element where they need to do this recipe. And, we don't know whether it was the maid's recipe or Moira's mom's recipe. Depends on who you ask. They have to figure out how to fold in the cheese. And that was that's one of those iconic scenes. If you need to explain Schitt's Creek to somebody who hasn't seen it, that's the YouTube clip you send them. You send them fold in the cheese. That encapsulates, how David is wired up, how Moira is wired up, and just the, it just kind of puts it into a 30-second clip what you're going to experience with that series. And that's one of those scenes that you just love. That's one of my warm blankets. Another one is, there are like so many that are so good. in season 1, there's like the bad parents. So Moira and Johnny are talking about, did we do bad as parents? They're just having that, like, they're starting to like question, like, did they do right by their kids growing up? And where that conversation came up was Alexis has to do her community service, even though they're not in California anymore. So Moira is filling out the paperwork to like transfer the community service hours or whatever to Schitt's Creek. And the episode starts when Moira calls Alexis in and asks her to like fill in the remaining pieces of the paperwork. And the only thing that's missing on the paperwork is Alexis's middle name. And so they get into this whole conversation of, and Alexis is asking, do you not know what my middle name is?
Right.
And they never actually like get to the answer of like what that is.
They don't reveal the name is not the point.
Yeah. Yeah. And they, at the end of the episode, Moira is still trying to guess, is it Elsbeth? I would know, she's saying, I would know the name I gave you. And it actually ends up her middle name is Claire, which fast forward to another episode that I really like is when Alexis's friends from New York or from her previous life show up in town just randomly.
The influencer girls.
And I will never forget their names. It's Albany, Claire, and Jitney are the names of the girls that show up in Schitt's Creek. Because those Claire is spelled Klar, because why would you not spell it any other way?
And Jitney is like the bus you take to the Hamptons. Yeah. I think. Yeah. So I've learned on Twitter. I've never been to the Hamptons, but like there's this bus that you get on a Friday, the Jitney.
Oh, okay. That makes a little more sense then. And then that's one of those episodes where you just see how far Alexis has gone in her character story by that point, because she has that opportunity to go back to that life when I think it was Claire is the ringleader of the three people that came to Schitt's Creek. Her offer to Alexis to come work at the PR firm. And that was something that Alexis wanted to do. Is she started Alexis Rose Communications or something like that. So she's wanting to start this, she has this opportunity to go work in the field that she is starting to thrive in Schitt's Creek. Right. And they go to she shows up at the Wobbly Elm one night, or that night when the three ladies are there. She meets up with them and she just sees, I think in that moment, how horrible, her friends are. And I think she has that moment of realization then that that's not what she wants. That's not her. That's not who she identifies with. And when Claire says, we never can let this happen again, meaning we shouldn't let so much time, she was saying we shouldn't let so much time go between us talking. Right. From Alexis's perspective, it's no, I'm never going to see you again. And she said, no, yeah, absolutely. We won't let this happen again. Yeah. Like two different ends to the same story.
Yeah, there's this quote that I have not properly attributed in years. That is, work for 6 years and spend the 7th alone or among strangers, so your friends don't stop you from becoming who you are. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of those moments where she essentially gets to time travel. Yeah. And catch up with these women who were on her same path and in her crew, and realize that like, nope, that doesn't fit anymore. Mm-hmm. Like, that's not who I am anymore. This isn't my life. These aren't my peers. Yeah. Yeah. There were so many life lessons, that were offered by Alexis. That was one of them. And one of the more direct ones that like hit me even in that moment, when I was watching it, it was when David was going for his driving test. David's license expired, and
they need to go to Elmdale so David can take the driving test. So Alexis is driving him out to Elmdale, and they have this conversation in the car about David's anxiety. And, that's something I've kind of dealt with, is like, I have pretty strong social anxiety. I have, just like the anxiety of unknown situations kind of gets me sometimes. And I don't know, let me tell a story, then I'll kind of back into that. So they're driving to Elmdale, and they're having this back and forth about how Alexis skates through life, is what David says. And Alexis just very quickly, tamps that down and says, "No, David, I walk through life in really nice shoes." That's not the life lesson. But then, David's like wanting to kick Alexis out of the car and say, "I need to do my 20-minute, calming transcendental meditation before the driver, evaluation person gets there." And the guy just like starts coming out. So he didn't have time to like do his 20-minute transcendental meditation. So he gets behind the wheel of the car, and then right before the driving evaluator gets there, she pokes her head into the car and she says, "David, nobody's thinking about you the way you're thinking about you." And David's just like, "Okay," he's just doing that. David, okay, I got it. And, that was one of those things for me that, and I'm in my mid 40s. That was one of those things that was a life lesson for me is, if you go do something, people aren't as hyper focused on you as you think they are, unless you are, supposed to be the center of attention in that moment. People aren't paying attention to you. Like, you can go to the store and do something stupid, like you grab the wrong can out of a display and the whole thing falls over. People are going to remember that in the moment, but they're not going to remember that it was you that did it. You're never going to see those people again. And that was kind of a life lesson for me. And it was kind of strange because like, I feel like I don't get a lot of life lessons anymore, so that was one of those.
And did you feel it in the moment?
I did. I felt it in the moment because I can remember going for my driving test and the amount of anxiety that I had. Like, my mom drove me to the testing center, and then it was me and the person in the car, doing the evaluation. And I almost like backed out. I almost said, "No, I can't do this today." I almost said that to the person that was doing the test because I was so anxious about it. And so I think maybe there was that direct parallel in my life. And then I was like, "Oh, okay." And maybe that's what people need sometimes is they need like that near 1-to-1 correlation between what's happened in their life and what they see happening with someone else for them to finally learn it.
Sure. And for that lesson to be delivered in a sentence and not in
a paragraph,
a year of therapy.
Yeah, yes. A paragraph or a year of therapy. Yes. Yeah, for sure. That was one of those moments where I knew I was going to be totally invested. And that was like a season 2. No, that was maybe a season 3 episode. I can't remember exactly which one. It was kind of midway, I think. But that was when I knew like, okay, this is my show for sure.
Yeah. I think when I was doing the rewatch I don't know, whenever season 6 was coming out and I was doing a rewatch to get ready for that. And eventually I was like, okay, I just need to fast forward to some favorites, which was like the open mic episode at the store was one that I was like, I just have to get there.
Yeah.
Cause it's such cause like one, I've been to hundreds of open mics in my life. Mm-hmm. So David's hatred of them is well earned. Although I actually have like a whole episode. I interviewed my friend Scotty Iseri about his love of open mics and life lessons from open mics. Okay. So, but I still think David's mistrust of them was well placed.
Did Scotty's life lessons of open mics resonate with you, or was it you went in with healthy like skepticism? And
no, I mean, Scotty is a friend that I met at an open mic in Chicago when we were both pursuing comedy. Okay. We met at Frankie J's and we were friends in comedy, and then we didn't see each other for many years. And then we ran into each other at a marketing conference, and then we've stayed in touch ever since. Mm-hmm. You know, but some of his life lessons were that everybody at the open mic is only there for themselves. So I think that lesson of nobody's thinking about you as much as you are. So what is success in an open mic is if someone looks up from preparing for their own slot to listen to you, like that's a win. At an open mic. The ways that open mics can build community when they're weekly and you're seeing people every week and you're seeing the same patrons every week, that you can. I do have some of my closest non-internet friends were people I met doing comedy, met at open mics. I think Patrick as a character always, he is often the most emotionally open and honest person in the cast. Mm-hmm. And so that's when he sings Simply the Best. And so I think there's a lot of Patrick's storyline of what happens when you put someone who is pretty open and honest about their own emotional state into a family of people who are learning what emotions are, like how to connect to their emotions. And David getting to a point where David is sort of like I don't know that he does this in the show or if it's just what I imagine, that he's someone who like swats away affection. He like defends himself against love for so long. And Patrick is just so like ready to be in love, ready to give love. I think it's a really powerful moment.
Yeah. And they do have that conversation. Yeah. It's the barbecue. So the scene right after Patrick's, ex-fiance shows up, David goes running into his room. Patrick comes in there to like try to explain what's going on. And David just has that bit of a monologue of, I'm damaged goods. I don't make myself emotionally available to people. And the moment I do, I learn this about you. And your ex-fiance is coming here to like try to get back with you. And, Patrick knows what he wants. And he says, I don't want that. I want you. I feel right when I'm with you. And and then, David has that moment where he's like, that may have been the sweetest thing anyone has ever said to me. Yeah. It's that dynamic between those two that I think, really resonates probably with a lot of viewers. And I hopefully a lot of viewers who, look at a gay couple as, they're looking for that stereotype of a gay couple. Right. And this is not that. These are, outside the premise that David came from a lot of money, they lost all their money, all that. Like these are just two normal people who love each other. And you see them on that path. And they do, they don't have that drama that you see with a lot of gay couple characters where it's a very tumultuous relationship and they're always on the verge of breaking up and there's always infidelity and there's always, those stereotypical things that come into it. This is just two people that love each other and you see that story and it normalizes it in a good way, in a very good way. Mm-hmm. You don't see a lot of the Rose's life before Schitt's Creek. You see like brief glimpses of it. You see Moira's sister come to town to, if not for anything else, just to rub it in their faces that they've lost all their money. I think her name was Dee Dee. Dee Dee came to town and she was I want to know how much the check was for. So, Dee Dee comes to help out. She wants to repay part of the $50,000 that the Roses lent to her. Lent gave her, whatever, there's an argument around that. And so she writes a check, gives it to Johnny, and he just sticks it in his pocket. And then they go on with their dinner. And then the close of the episode is they finally look at the check and it's not even enough to cover dinner. So I want to know how much it was for. How much does a dinner at the diner cost?
Let's talk about her name. Just went out of my head. Twyla. So in this penultimate episode, we find out that she has won millions of dollars before the series started.
Yes.
Right. She is a gajillionaire, I believe is the scientific financial term. Mm-hmm. That when I started to rewatch, knowing, when you rewatch now, knowing she's a millionaire the whole time, it gives her such a fascinating, she was always a delightful character.
Yes.
But it rewrites the whole series in a very interesting way.
It does. And I actually thought about this. I'm trying to decide. And this is like when you definitely know you're doing the inside baseball thing with Schitt's Creek is.
Yeah.
Did they make her a millionaire in season 6? Or did they know in season 1 that was her backstory? And I'm guessing, I think it was a device. I think they made her a millionaire as a device to show how far Alexis had grown, because Twyla offered her the money, some insane amount of money, and she turns it, she thanks Twyla for it, but gives it back, saying that she wants to do it on her own. And I don't think it's disingenuous that she, was made a millionaire in the penultimate episode, but my thought is she wasn't a millionaire the whole time, but it is interesting to go back and watch.
The writers didn't know she was a millionaire the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would love, I feel like it's not a question I've seen asked, but I would love to know, at what point did the writers decide that for Twyla? Mm-hmm. Because I did find it to be a bit of information that on a rewatch is fascinating to me. Mm-hmm. That it's such a big secret that now that you're keeping with her.
Right. Later in that episode, she reveals that she just bought the cafe, and and she's going to make it Twyla's Cafe Tropical. Yeah. Part of it is, who are the owners? I guess part of it. The questions I have is, Twyla was really when they had that unpaid tab, when the Roses had the unpaid tab at the restaurant. Yeah. She was really trying to get them to pay up. So I guess, if she were, she didn't own the cafe. So I'm reconciling flashbacks now.
Right.
Yeah. So, okay. That's why she was asking for the money. She didn't own the cafe. So she was watching out for the owners.
Yeah. She couldn't just write it off and everybody, it was still a secret. You did say earlier when we were talking, we have to talk about Bob.
Yes. Bob.
So let's talk about Bob.
So Bob is one of those characters like Roland that I didn't like in season 1.
Yeah.
And by season 6, I still didn't like him.
Yeah.
He is like the one character that never grew on me.
He also doesn't grow.
He doesn't.
He's one of the only characters, if not the only character, with no growth arc.
Right. And when in comparison, when Roland is being dense about something, you can tell he's being dense on purpose. Just from, the context of a conversation, not letting something go. Roland is doing that because that's who he is, and he knows he is pushing buttons. And that's what he likes to do. Bob, he doesn't get it. Like he is really clueless and doesn't try to learn. And he is one of the characters that just never grew on me. You know, he does have a few good moments in the series. Yeah. Aside from Bob not growing, the thing that just drove me crazy to no end is anytime Bob enters a scene, he's doing that fast walk shuffle thing. You know, kind of if John Wayne was walking fast, coming into the scene. If you haven't noticed it before, you'll notice it now. Every time he walks into a scene, that affect of his, you know, how he holds himself. Yeah, I don't know. It just seemed, did not like Bob. Did not like Bob.
So you agreed with Gwendolyn's choice to leave him?
Yes. And funny enough, on the rewatch, at Carl's funeral. So Carl's funeral. So Bob's brother, Carl, was, you know, found swinging from the ceiling fan at his house. Right. And, you know, I think one of Bob's funniest lines in the whole series for him is, yeah, Carl found the studs on that one, talking about like how well he mounted the ceiling fan. And they're talking about, you know, Bob is just totally clueless that it's obvious this was a suicide, like that Carl killed himself, because Bob is still trying to figure out how Carl's belt got tangled up on the ceiling fan as he was working on it or something like that. And he was just swinging for days until they found him. So that was Bob's funniest line. But at Carl's funeral, there were a couple of moments in there that there was one moment in there that you see pay off in season 6 or season 5. And that's, so Gwen runs off with the pastor. And at Carl's funeral, the pastor is sitting next to Gwen, and he's doing a little more consoling of Gwen when she's crying than would be normal. And I don't know if that was like intentional. They planted that there as a backstory thing. But it was just one of those connections that you see from season 1 to season 6.
Wow. I will look for that. I never would have noticed it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's like one of those joyful moments of watching the series again, is you see those connections. And there are a couple of those that happen. There's another one where David and Patrick are in the store and they're having a conversation about something. Oh, I think it was the episode where the customer gave Patrick his phone number. I think, his name was Ken, because David kept mentioning like he was a Ken doll. So his name was Ken. And so there's like a follow-up scene where they're talking about, you know, oh, you should just call him and go on a date. You've never dated another guy. So you need to I need to know that we're not going to have this conversation 5 years from now. And in that scene, there's like an extra in the background that is, you know, browsing through the store. Fast forward like 3 episodes later, they're at the flea market. And Wendy, who was David's boss at the Blouse Barn, is starting to open up a knockoff of Rose Apothecary, and they have a booth at the flea market. And Wendy's business partner Antonio comes walking up, and he's like the knockoff David.
Yes.
And as they're being introduced, David says, have I seen you in my store before? And then Antonio just gives him a terse no, and just goes back to what he was. On the rewatch, that actor is in the background like 3 episodes prior, and he totally looks like he's scoping out the store. So good.
It's such good writing. It's such good direction.
There are a lot of like callbacks to previous things in the series. I saw one interview with Dan Levy where he was talking about Schitt's Creek, you know, why he chose to end when they are, you know, truly at their peak of popularity. Yeah. And he said, you know, I didn't want it to become, you know, where we lose our jobs because we're not popular anymore. It's best to go out on top. And he said he intentionally wrote season 6 as like I think he called it a love letter to the fans.
Yeah.
And there was one. And so in season 6, you see a lot of callbacks to things that happened in the past, or some stories like pay off in season 6 that started earlier. And one of them is, if you think back to, I think it was the episode 1 of season 3, where it starts with, the scene opens, David's making his bed. His mom walks in asking where her portfolio is. And then Jake comes walking out of the bathroom. And there's like that embarrassing moment. So end of season 2, Jake and Stevie, or David and Stevie are trying to decide
what their relationship.
Yeah. Who, which of the two, David or Stevie has caught Jake's attention at that party. And it turns out they both had, but we learned that a little later. And then, start of season 3, there's that moment by moment, increasing of, embarrassment where, David's had someone at the hotel room, and his mom comes walking in, and Jake comes out of the bathroom in a towel, and that's awkward for David. And then Johnny walks into this moment, and it makes it more awkward. And then Alexis comes in the door, makes it even more awkward.
Right.
And so there's that. But then we have like this little parallel in season 6 where Ted's in the Galapagos, Alexis is in the hotel room, and it's their anniversary. So they're doing, they're having a video chat, and it's clear where this is going to go. And then David walks in, and then, then Johnny walks in, then Moira walks in. And in that moment you see that parallel. And there's also another in that scene in season 6, there are like a couple of other callbacks. One is the bunny cam from, Alexis is working at the veterinary clinic. She sets up the bunny cam, and Ted walks in, and he got done with his workout, and he's like all sweaty and stretching, and he like undresses. And, David is like, I am obsessed with this. And he grabs the laptop and, goes to another room. And then when Alexis is there and David comes in, David's like, is he dressed? And she's like, yeah. And he's just like, oh, I don't care. And he walks out. And then Moira walks in, and she says a callback to when she's looking for her nude photos from the internet. That episode, she is giving advice to Alexis. Alexis, what have I always said about putting yourself naked on the internet? Always do it with good lighting, and that's kind of a callback to that. So like season 6 is just, moment by moment, you get those payoffs of, having been a close watcher of the series, you get those moments where you kind of get that satisfaction of knowing why that made it into that scene.
Yeah. How many times through do you think you've been?
Seasons 1 through 5, probably 4. And then season 6, I've watched twice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
I need to, now I'm inspired to do like a closer rewatch and not just go looking for my favorite scenes.
Yeah. I've gotten to the point where I skip through, or I'll either skip over episodes or I'll skip through scenes, particularly the Bob's scenes. Bob's Bagels is a painful episode for me to watch just because it's all about Bob. And it's just kind of one of those that like, I don't like Bob, so I'm going to skip that. An episode, and there aren't many episodes that don't follow a through line, that they don't build on, previous episodes. Yeah. There's not many episodes that stand alone. The Christmas episode, obviously it's a holiday thing. It stands alone. You don't know where in the timeline it is. You do know that, Patrick and David are together during that, but you don't know exactly when in the timeline it is. Another one is, do you remember the episode where one of David's ex-boyfriends comes to town to take a photo shoot with Moira? His name is Sebastian Rain.
Vaguely.
Yeah. See, that, in my opinion, that episode doesn't push the story at all. If anything, it's only that David will do what it takes to preserve his family's dignity, because kind of the premise of the episode is this photographer comes in from New York, wants to do a photo shoot of Moira. David is really, it's apparent to David that this guy coming, his name is Sebastian, that Sebastian is just going to take photos that are pretty, that are just going to exploit, look how far this star has fallen. When David learns that they took photos that day, because David said, I thought you weren't going to take any photos. And, Moira was like, well, he wanted to do some establishing, she's using one of her fancy words. I forgot what it was. But then in that moment, you see David is going to start scheming, like how he's going to get the flashcard back from Sebastian. And so he goes to Sebastian's room, and they, it's obvious they hook up, and, he gets the memory card before he leaves the next morning. So maybe that's the point of that episode.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's one that you feel fine hopping over.
Yeah, I can skip over that one for sure.
Well, is there anything I haven't asked you about Schitt's Creek that was on your list of things you wanted to make sure to say?
I can't think of anything. I had jotted down just a couple of notes, but I think we hit them all.
If we're introducing people to it, your suggestion is start with the enchilada scene.
Yes. Yeah. So if someone hasn't watched Schitt's Creek, I would say find the clip for Fold in the Cheese. Watch that scene, so you know where it's going to go. You know where the story's going. You know what the vibe of the series is going to be, and then start season 1, episode 1, and just settle in for a delightful ride with the Rose family. Yeah.
Great. Well, this has been really fun to talk to you about something that is not a website.
This has been a lot of fun. Yes.
Which is not to say that it wasn't fun talking to you about Drupal during the project.
Sure.
It was I really enjoyed working with you and your team. So I'm not trying to say that wasn't fun.
Well, when I'm not talking about Schitt's Creek, I'm talking about Drupal. So after we get done here, I'm just going to go do some Drupal. So it's what I do.
Awesome. Well, have a good afternoon doing Drupal.
Yes. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to Finding Favorites with Leah Jones. Please make sure to subscribe and drop us a 5-star review on iTunes. Now, go out and enjoy your favorite things.